Every time you step into a grocery store, the employees already know something most shoppers don't. It's not because they're better at shopping, it's because they have access to information you'll never see. Before customers even reach for a shopping cart, store workers have already reviewed incoming deliveries, checked inventory systems, and noticed which products are about to become more expensive. Because of that insider perspective, many employees quietly add certain items to their own carts before heading home. The item that takes the number one spot is built around an incredibly simple habit. Most people ignore it because it seems too ordinary to matter. Ironically, that small oversight ends up costing them money year after year without them ever realizing it. Let's begin the countdown with number 12. Number 12. Ground beef. Most shoppers assume the best time to buy beef is on the weekend. The thinking seems logical: more customers, more promotions, and better deals. But grocery store employees often do the exact opposite. Instead of shopping on busy Saturdays or Sundays, many of them head to the meat department during the middle of the week, typically on Tuesday mornings or Wednesday afternoons, when the store is quieter and fresh markdowns are more likely to appear. The reason is simple. As employees rotate inventory, products approaching their sell-by date are often discounted during the morning or early afternoon. That's when you'll frequently see those bright markdown stickers placed on quality cuts of meat. By the time the weekend arrives, most of those bargains have already been purchased. The meat that's still sitting in the case by Saturday evening usually isn't the hidden deal. It's simply the product that other shoppers chose to leave behind. But timing is only part of the story. Store employees also pay close attention to beef because of broader supply issues that aren't likely to disappear anytime soon. According to data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the American cattle herd has fallen to one of its lowest levels in decades. Several years of drought, rising feed costs, and ranchers reducing herd sizes instead of absorbing mounting losses have tightened beef supplies. Unlike many shortages, rebuilding cattle herds takes years, not just a few months. On top of that, processing expenses, labor costs, and long-distance transportation continue adding pressure throughout the supply chain. By the time a package of beef reaches the grocery store, its price reflects much more than simply the cost of raising cattle. Today, ground beef commonly sells for around $6 to $7 per pound in many American supermarkets. Ribeye steaks often range between $14 and $18 per pound, with prices climbing even higher in large metropolitan areas or for premium grades. That's why experienced grocery employees don't hesitate when they find a quality package marked down. They know those discounts rarely last long. If they decide to wait until after finishing the rest of their shopping, there's a good chance someone else will grab it first. If you want to use the same strategy, try visiting the meat department during the quieter part of the week. Watch for newly applied markdown stickers, and always check the packaging or sell-by date so you understand exactly what you're buying. Number 11. Rotisserie chicken. Near the end of the day, just before grocery store employees head home, a familiar routine quietly unfolds. Many of them make one final stop at the hot food section before leaving the building. They glance into the warming case, count how many rotisserie chickens are still available, and often place one in their cart. They aren't doing it because it's the only way to buy chicken. They're doing it because they understand how the product is priced and why it's one of the best values in the entire store. Most shoppers don't realize that rotisserie chickens are often sold as loss leaders. In other words, retailers price them at or very close to cost because the goal isn't to earn a large profit on the chicken itself. The real objective is to attract customers into the store, where they'll purchase higher margin items during the same trip. That's why the price has remained remarkably consistent at many major retailers for years. Costco's famous rotisserie chicken continues to sell for around $4.99, while Walmart typically offers theirs in the $5.97 to $7.97 range. Those prices aren't accidental. They're part of a strategy designed to increase overall sales rather than maximize profit on a single product. Store employees understand this better than anyone because they see exactly how quickly those chickens disappear. At busy locations, hundreds can be sold in a single day. Weekend evenings are especially hectic, and by the time many customers arrive, the warming case has often been picked clean. Employees finishing their shifts already know that if they wait too long, there may not be a single chicken left. But the value extends well beyond the initial purchase. A single rotisserie chicken can easily provide several meals with very little additional effort. Fresh out of the container, it's a complete dinner. The leftover meat can be shredded for tacos, sandwiches, wraps, salads, soups, or grain bowls over the next day or two. Even after the meat is gone, the bones can be simmered with water, onions, carrots, celery, and herbs to make a flavorful homemade broth at almost no extra cost. Number 10. Eggs. You don't need to see empty shelves to know something is changing in the egg market. Sometimes the first warning sign is much smaller, a new number on the price tag. That's one reason grocery store employees pay close attention to the egg section almost every day. It's not because prices change constantly, but because when they do begin moving, they often rise much faster than most shoppers expect. A dozen standard eggs may cost $3 or $4 one week, but supply disruptions can push that price noticeably higher within just a few days. Premium options like organic or cage-free eggs are usually affected even sooner because their supply is already more limited. The reason goes back to how egg production works. When outbreaks of avian influenza spread through large poultry farms, millions of laying hens can be removed from production in a relatively short period of time. The U.S. Department of Agriculture closely monitors these changes through its egg market reports, and the pattern has repeated itself several times in recent years. Stable prices can shift to much higher levels surprisingly quickly, while recovery often takes considerably longer. Store employees notice more than what's sitting in the display case. They watch how many cartons arrive with each delivery, how quickly customers empty the shelves, and even whether new price labels have already been printed and are waiting to be placed on the shelves. That's why it's not unusual for an employee finishing a shift to quietly pick up a carton or two before heading home. They're not trying to build a huge stockpile. They simply know that the price they saw that morning could easily be different a few days later. There is one important mistake to avoid, however. Unlike many shelf-stable foods, eggs have a limited lifespan and must remain refrigerated. Buying far more than your household can realistically use before they expire doesn't save money. It simply increases the chance that you'll end up throwing food away. A more practical approach is to keep enough eggs for roughly 2 to 3 weeks of normal use. Store them in their original carton and place them toward the back of the refrigerator, where temperatures remain more stable. The refrigerator door may seem convenient, but it's exposed to frequent temperature changes every time it's opened, which can shorten freshness. Many grocery employees think of eggs as an early indicator of broader changes happening throughout the food supply chain. When egg prices begin climbing, it's often a sign that production or distribution problems are developing behind the scenes, and those issues rarely disappear overnight. Number 9. Frozen chicken. When you notice a grocery store employee placing a couple of large bags of frozen chicken into their cart before heading home, chances are they're not simply planning meals for the week. More often than not, they've noticed something behind the scenes, a sale ending that day, a smaller than expected shipment, or inventory data suggesting today's price may not last much longer. Frozen chicken isn't the most exciting item in the freezer aisle, but that's exactly why experienced shoppers value it. While beef prices can rise sharply when supplies tighten, chicken has generally remained one of the most dependable and budget-friendly sources of protein. Depending on the cut and the store, frozen chicken breasts, thighs, or wings usually sell for around $3 to $5 per pound. When stores run a genuine promotion and prices fall below that range, employees know those bags won't stay in the freezer for long. Instead of waiting until they need more chicken, they buy it while the discount is still available. The biggest advantage isn't simply saving a few dollars, it's versatility. One package of frozen chicken can become grilled chicken for dinner one night, a hearty soup the next, a quick stir-fry later in the week, or several days' worth of meal prep lunches. By changing the seasonings, sauces, or cooking method, the same ingredient can produce completely different meals, helping prevent menu fatigue while keeping grocery costs under control. That flexibility also reduces the temptation to order takeout on busy evenings. When affordable protein is already sitting in the freezer, preparing dinner often becomes much easier than making an expensive last-minute food order. There's one common mistake, however, that many people make. They place the entire package into the freezer exactly as they bought it. Later, when they only need 2 chicken breasts or a few thighs, they're forced to thaw the entire bag. If the remaining chicken isn't used immediately, it may lose quality or create unnecessary waste if it's repeatedly thawed and refrozen. A simple solution takes only a few minutes. Before freezing, Divide the chicken into meal-sized portions, seal each one separately, and label it with the purchase date. That way, you can remove only what you need while keeping the rest safely frozen. Number 8. Butter. Unlike many grocery items that jump in price almost overnight, butter tends to become more expensive little by little. Those gradual increases are easy to overlook, which is exactly why so many shoppers end up paying more than they realize over the course of a year. When a grocery store employee adds several boxes of butter to their cart before heading home, they're usually not stocking up for this weekend's baking. More often, they've noticed a temporary sale or seen through the store's ordering system that the next shipment will arrive with a higher wholesale cost. They know the opportunity is short-lived, so they buy while the price is still favorable. Butter prices are closely tied to the dairy industry. As the cost of cattle feed, fuel, transportation, and processing labor rises, those increases gradually work their way through the supply chain until they eventually appear on the grocery shelf. In many supermarkets, a 1-pound package of butter typically sells for somewhere between $4 and $6 under normal market conditions. As the holiday baking season approaches, especially before Thanksgiving and Christmas, prices often climb as demand increases. Here's something many shoppers don't notice. After the holidays are over, butter prices don't always return to their previous levels. Instead, they often settle at a slightly higher baseline than before. One dairy industry employee compared it to watching the tide slowly recede. You rarely notice the water moving minute by minute, but when you look back later, the shoreline has clearly changed. Butter prices behave much the same way. There's rarely a dramatic announcement or sudden jump. The increases happen gradually until one day you realize you're paying significantly more than you used to. The smartest strategy is to buy extra butter only when you find a genuine sale, not simply because prices seem a little lower than last week. Purchase an amount your household can realistically use over the next several months without overbuying. Butter freezes exceptionally well in its original packaging and generally maintains excellent quality for 6 to 9 months. When you're ready to use it, transfer it to the refrigerator about a day in advance and allow it to thaw slowly. Gradual thawing helps preserve both texture and flavor better than leaving it on the kitchen counter. When grocery employees buy butter before finishing their shift, they're usually thinking beyond this week's meals. They're taking advantage of today's price because they already know tomorrow's shipment may cost more. So far, which item on this countdown has surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to hear what catches people's attention. Number 7. Coffee. The first hint that coffee prices are about to change rarely appears on the store shelf. It usually shows up behind the scenes, long before customers notice anything unusual. A grocery employee checking the store's ordering system may see that a familiar coffee brand, one that's been consistently available for years, has suddenly been marked as temporarily unavailable, with no estimated restock date. Out on the sales floor, however, nothing looks different. The shelves are still neatly stocked, the packaging hasn't changed, and shoppers continue filling their carts as if everything is normal. But employees have seen this pattern before. It often begins with one popular roast disappearing. Soon afterward, the whole bean version becomes difficult to order. Then the manufacturer quietly introduces a slightly smaller package while keeping the price nearly the same. Before long, the entire coffee aisle reflects higher prices, and those increases tend to stick. These changes aren't random. Much of the pressure starts at the source. Brazil, the world's largest coffee producer, has experienced repeated periods of severe weather in recent years, including droughts, frost, and unpredictable growing conditions that have reduced harvests. Smaller harvests mean tighter global supplies, and that pushes raw coffee prices higher. The supply chain adds even more pressure. Transportation costs, packaging expenses, and labor remain elevated, while imported coffee may also be affected by tariffs and other import-related costs before it even reaches grocery store shelves. Instead of raising prices dramatically all at once, many manufacturers use a quieter strategy known as shrinkflation. At first glance, the bag appears exactly the same. The design, colors, and price all look familiar. The difference is hidden in the fine print. The package now contains 2 or 3 fewer ounces than before. Most shoppers don't notice the smaller weight. They simply realize their coffee seems to run out sooner than it used to. Today, a standard bag of ground coffee or whole beans typically costs somewhere between $12 and $18 at many supermarkets, representing a noticeable increase compared with just a few years ago. If you find your preferred brand at a genuinely discounted price, it often makes sense to buy one extra bag while it's available. Number 6. Pure honey. Grocery store employees often notice the first sign of a price increase before it ever appears on the shelf. And with honey, that warning usually isn't the price tag itself. It's the size of the bottle. One day, the familiar 24-ounce jar quietly disappears. In its place sits a 12-ounce version occupying the exact same shelf space, selling for almost the same price. Most shoppers walk right past without noticing. Employees, however, recognize exactly what's happened. The package has become smaller while the price has barely changed. In other words, you're paying nearly the same amount of money but taking home much less honey. It's one of the clearest examples of shrinkflation, and unless you check the net weight, it's remarkably easy to miss. Honey also stands apart from almost every other food on this countdown for another important reason. When it's pure, properly sealed, and stored correctly, honey has an extraordinarily long shelf life. Archaeologists have even discovered ancient jars of honey that remained chemically stable after thousands of years. That's not a marketing slogan, it's the result of honey's unique natural properties. Its low moisture content, naturally acidic environment, and antimicrobial compounds make it extremely resistant to spoilage. Unlike foods that require refrigeration or have strict expiration dates, honey can remain usable for an incredibly long time when kept sealed. That makes buying it ahead of future price increases much less risky than stocking up on highly perishable foods like eggs or fresh meat. Honey simply sits on the shelf until you need it. The production side, however, is much more fragile than many people realize. Every jar begins with healthy honeybee colonies, abundant flowering plants, favorable weather, and successful beekeeping operations. When bee populations decline because of disease, pesticide exposure, habitat loss, or other environmental pressures, honey production falls with them. And unlike manufactured products, expanding honey production isn't something that can happen overnight. When domestic supplies become limited, retailers often rely more heavily on imported honey. If shipping costs, transportation expenses, or import costs rise, those increases eventually show up in grocery store prices. Today, a typical 12-ounce jar of honey often sells for $8 to $12, while raw or unfiltered varieties usually cost even more. Because manufacturers sometimes reduce the size of the container instead of raising the price outright, the true cost per ounce can increase without attracting much attention. Number 5. Extra virgin olive oil. The first indication that olive oil prices are about to rise usually isn't found on the grocery shelf. It appears behind the scenes, inside the store's inventory system. One week, the ordering screen might show an allocation of 8 cases for a popular 1-liter bottle. The following week, that number quietly drops to 4. Customers walking through the aisle don't notice anything unusual because the shelves are still full. But employees reading those inventory reports immediately recognize what's happening. A smaller allocation often means today's prices may not last much longer. The reasons begin far from the grocery store. Much of the world's extra virgin olive oil comes from Spain, Italy, and Portugal. In recent years, those regions have experienced repeated droughts and unusually difficult growing seasons, reducing olive harvests and limiting overall production. When fewer olives are harvested, less oil is available for export. Before a single bottle reaches an American supermarket, it has already absorbed higher production costs. Add international shipping, import expenses, bottling, transportation, and retail markups, and the final shelf price reflects pressure from every stage of the supply chain. Those increases don't disappear overnight simply because one harvest improves. Once the overall cost of production rises, prices often settle at a permanently higher level. A bottle of quality extra virgin olive oil that once sold on promotion for $10 to $12 now commonly costs $15 to $22, and those older sale prices have become increasingly difficult to find because the economics behind them have changed. There's another subtle change many shoppers overlook. The bottle often looks exactly the same as it always has. The label hasn't changed, the packaging feels familiar, and it occupies the same place on the shelf. The difference is hidden in the volume. What used to be a 1-liter bottle may now contain only 750 milliliters, while the price remains nearly unchanged. That's why it's important to compare the unit price rather than focusing only on the shelf price. A bottle that appears cheaper at first glance may actually cost more per ounce than a larger container sitting right beside it. Number 4. Canned salmon. When canned salmon starts becoming more expensive, the first clue usually isn't an empty shelf or a higher price tag. In many cases, it's something much quieter. A promotion simply disappears. One week, the weekly grocery ad features a buy multiple special on a popular 14.75-ounce can of wild Alaska salmon. The next week, that deal is gone without any explanation. There's no replacement offer, no sign announcing a shortage, and the shelf still appears fully stocked. But behind the scenes, grocery employees often see a very different picture. While reviewing inventory orders, they may notice that the larger cans are no longer available from suppliers. Before long, those products are replaced with smaller cans or private label versions that seem similarly priced, until you compare the cost per ounce and realize you're paying noticeably more for less salmon. The reasons extend far beyond the fish itself. Every can reflects the cost of Alaska's fishing season: fuel for commercial fishing vessels, seafood processing facilities, metal packaging, labeling, refrigerated transportation, warehouse operations, and, in some cases, international shipping or imported components within the supply chain. When several of those expenses increase at the same time, the higher costs eventually reach the grocery shelf. A can of salmon that once sold on promotion for around $3 to $4 now commonly falls in the $5 to $7 range, and the larger cans many shoppers were used to seeing have become increasingly difficult to find. That's why it's important to compare the price per ounce, not just the total price printed on the shelf label. Smaller packages with familiar-looking prices can quietly raise your actual cost without attracting much attention. From a nutritional standpoint, canned salmon continues to be one of the strongest values in the seafood aisle. Even a single small can typically provides more than 20 grams of high-quality protein, along with beneficial omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and several important minerals that many adults, particularly older adults, don't consume in adequate amounts. It's also remarkably convenient. Because it's shelf-stable, it requires no refrigeration until opened and can quickly be used in salads, mixed into pasta, served over rice, or turned into salmon patties with very little preparation. Number 3. Block cheese. If you asked grocery store employees which type of cheese they buy for their own kitchens, most of them would choose a block of cheese instead of the pre-shredded version without hesitation. At first glance, shredded cheese seems like the more convenient option. It's already prepared, ready to sprinkle onto pizza, tacos, casseroles, or salads, and it saves you a few minutes in the kitchen. But employees who regularly compare grocery prices know there's more to the story. The first difference is cost. Package for package, pre-shredded cheese almost always costs more per ounce than an equivalent block of the same variety. That extra convenience comes with a premium, and while the difference may seem small on a single purchase, it adds up over months and years of grocery shopping. There's another difference hiding inside the bag. To keep the shredded pieces from sticking together during storage, manufacturers coat them with anti-caking agents, most commonly cellulose powder or similar food-safe ingredients. These additives aren't harmful, but they can change the way the cheese behaves when it's cooked. If you've ever tried making a creamy cheese sauce and wondered why it felt slightly grainy instead of perfectly smooth, the anti-caking coating is often part of the reason. Freshly grated cheese from a block melts more evenly, creating a smoother texture in sauces, soups, and baked dishes. Storage is another advantage. Hard cheeses such as sharp cheddar, Monterey Jack, Colby, or low-moisture mozzarella freeze surprisingly well. Wrap the block tightly to reduce air exposure, place it in the freezer, and it can maintain good quality for several months. When you're ready to use it, transfer it to the refrigerator a day in advance, then grate only the amount you need. That approach reduces waste, minimizes extra grocery trips, and allows you to take advantage of genuine sales without worrying about using the entire block immediately. This is exactly why grocery employees often buy block cheese when they see a meaningful discount. They know they're getting more cheese for the money, fewer unnecessary additives, better melting performance, and a lower cost per ounce than the bag of pre-shredded cheese sitting just a few inches away on the same shelf. Number 2. Imported pasta. The earliest sign that imported pasta is becoming more expensive usually isn't an empty shelf or a dramatic price increase. It's something far easier to miss. The package gets smaller. One day, the familiar 16-ounce box quietly disappears, replaced by a 12-ounce version that looks almost identical and carries nearly the same price tag. Most shoppers never notice the difference. The brand name is the same, the packaging looks familiar, and nothing on the shelf announces that anything has changed. Grocery store employees, however, often know weeks before customers do. While reviewing inventory orders, they see the original product code disappear from the system. Deliveries become less frequent, pallet sizes shrink, and imported Italian brands that once occupied large sections of the shelf are gradually reduced to just a handful of boxes. By the time shoppers begin noticing the change, it has already been happening behind the scenes for quite a while. There's another detail many consumers never think about. Not every box of pasta is made the same way. Authentic imported pasta, produced in Italy from 100% durum wheat semolina, has characteristics that often set it apart from lower-cost alternatives. It generally holds its shape better during cooking, maintains a firmer texture, and allows sauces to cling more effectively. Those differences aren't simply advertising claims. They result from the type of wheat used and the traditional manufacturing process. That distinction also affects pricing. Standard domestic pasta often sells for around $1.25 to $2 per package, while genuine imported Italian pasta typically ranges from $2.50 to $4, sometimes even more when shipping costs, import expenses, and durum wheat prices all rise at the same time. When grocery employees notice those wholesale costs increasing and full-size packages disappearing from incoming shipments, they already know retail prices are likely to follow, even if the shelf still looks unchanged. One mistake many shoppers make is relying on the wording on the front of the package instead of reading the details. Phrases like Italian style or Italian recipe are marketing terms. They don't necessarily mean the pasta was produced in Italy. If you're looking for authentic imported pasta, check for Product of Italy on the label. That tells you where it was actually manufactured. It's also worth checking the package weight every time you buy. A box that looks exactly like the one you purchased last year may quietly contain 2 to 4 fewer ounces while selling for nearly the same price. Number 1. Jasmine and basmati rice. There's a shopping habit that many grocery store employees quietly follow at home, and it's often misunderstood. Once every month, they buy another bag of jasmine or basmati rice, even if the container in their pantry is nowhere near empty. To an outside observer, that might look like unnecessary stockpiling or anxiety about future shortages. In reality, it's neither. It's a simple strategy based on consistency. Experienced grocery workers understand that rice shouldn't be purchased only after you've run out. The best time to buy is when prices are stable, larger package sizes are still available, and you have the freedom to choose the best value instead of whatever happens to be left on the shelf. Many employees call this maintenance buying. It's not panic shopping or hoarding. It's the habit of replacing what you use at a steady pace, so your pantry never reaches the point where you're forced to buy during a price spike. To the average shopper, rice seems like one of the most dependable products in the store. The shelves are usually full, and prices often appear relatively stable. But employees who watch deliveries tell a different story. Jasmine rice is primarily imported from Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia, while basmati rice comes largely from India and Pakistan. That means the price you see at your local supermarket depends on events happening thousands of miles away. Weather conditions in Southeast and South Asia, changes in international shipping costs, fuel prices, export restrictions, and government trade policies can all influence what eventually appears on a grocery shelf. Any one of those factors can push prices higher much faster than most shoppers expect. Interestingly, the earliest warning sign usually isn't an empty shelf. It's a missing package size. The familiar 20-pound bag quietly disappears while the 10-pound version remains fully stocked. At first glance, the smaller bag seems like the better deal because the total price is lower. But when you calculate the cost per pound, the larger package often offers substantially better value. Shoppers who focus only on the sticker price may unknowingly pay more for every serving without realizing it. These products don't all come from the same department. They aren't connected by the same supply chain, and they certainly don't share the same price. What they do share is something much more important. The people who work in grocery stores usually recognize changes long before customers ever notice them. Not because they have secret knowledge, but because their jobs expose them to information most shoppers never see. They notice incoming shipments getting smaller while shelves remain full. They see promotions quietly disappear after running for years. They watch product codes become discontinued, and they recognize when manufacturers replace familiar package sizes with smaller ones while leaving prices almost unchanged. Those subtle signals almost always appear before the shelf price changes. By the time customers realize prices have increased, many employees quietly bought what they needed days, or even weeks, earlier during an ordinary shopping trip. Perhaps the biggest lesson isn't the specific foods themselves. It's the mindset behind how experienced grocery employees shop.